Inshallah ta'ala, I'm just your brother. The topic that we want to discuss today is the deception of Iblees, our common enemy that swore by Allah that he will mislead every single one of us. As Allah Azza wa Jal quoted him saying, فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. By your might, I will mislead every single one of them. He will attempt to lead us astray. He will attempt to beautify that which is misguided, that which is deviance. All in order to fulfill his mission, which is for us to fall off and eventually become from the inhabitants of the hellfire. This is why, my beloved brothers and sisters, it is important, right, that we understand the traps and the methods of Iblis. If someone today swore and he threatened you, I am going to do X, Y, and Z. I am going to harm your family. I'm going to break in. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Will we sleep peacefully? Al-jawabu la. We will make sure that this individual is put to bed. We will make sure that his threat is eliminated, because he is an enemy that is making these explicit, open threats. And no one is going to allow that to just go by like that. This kitab of Ibn al-Jawzi rahmatullahi alayhi called Talbis Iblis, which translates to be the deception of Iblis. A book that was magnificently written by this great Imam, who I believe passed away in the year 597. What I was mentioning to the brothers and the attendees in Masjid al-Firdaus, there are so many statements of this Imam, it is as if he is living amongst us. Some of the things that he covered and mentioned, right, is in essence, brothers and sisters, that which will deal with a lot of our social problems. A lot of the issues that we're having, if we just opened up, whether it is this kitab or the kitab of Ibn al-Jawzi rahmatullahi alayhi, Sayyid al-Khatir, a lot of the issues that we are having will be dealt with accordingly. Even though he passed away over 800 years ago. This is why I felt that it is extremely important to maybe take out benefits from this kitab and then to turn it into lectures. From the statements of Iblis is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioning to us, وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالُهُمْ وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Also Allah says, وَإِذْ زَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ. The shaitan, he beautified for them their actions. And I want to start with this first statement of his, when he said, وَمِن تَلْبِيسِ إِبْلِيسَ عَلَى النَّاسِ صَدُّهُمْ عَنِ الْعِلْمِ. From the deceptions of Iblis upon the people is him blocking knowledge away from them. Why? لِأَنَّ الْعِلْمَ نُورٌ. Because this ilm is a light. فَإِذَا أَطْفَأَ مَصَابِيحَهُمْ خَبَّطَهُمْ فِي الظُّلَمِ كَيْفَ شَاءَ. If the shaitan now manages to extinguish this light, he will make sure that you trip up in the darkness. This ilm is a nur, right? أَوَ مَنْ كَانَ مَيْتًا فَأَحْيَيْنَاهُ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا يَمْشِي بِهِ فِي النَّاسِ. As Allah Azza wa Jalla told us. He gives us the example of a dead person and the one who now comes to life. He came to life with what? He came to life with knowledge. وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُ نُورًا. And we gave him this light that he used to navigate while it was dark. Imagine now you're walking in the forest and no one has a light. You will see the people tripping over left, right, and center. They find a torch. With this torch they will be guided to safety. And ilm is exactly like that. You are not able to know the traps and the methods of Iblis unless, my brothers and my sisters, we take time out to learn this religion. Some of you guys may have seen this video going viral NH06WKD. N for November, H for Hotel, 06. W for Washington, K for Kilo, and then D for Delta. Phonetic alphabet. Whoever has a car with that number plate, please kindly move it, inshallah ta'ala. Attending lectures is one thing that may increase your iman. However, you will not be able to keep that iman steady except by what? Attending classes where you learn how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I normally give this example of a lecture being like paracetamol. What does paracetamol do for you? It's a quick fix, sah? However, does it now treat the underlying issues? The answer is no, it doesn't. You need an operation, a very serious operation to deal with the real issue at hand. And beneficial knowledge is like that. A lot of the problems that we have, we can't just solve it through attending lectures and little reminders. Yes, we feel great after it. We feel that boost. However, how would you keep that iman that has now gone sky high steady? The way you will do that is by studying the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is why we need to go deep into the basics of our religion. No one is saying become a scholar, become a serious student of knowledge. No, just study the basics that will help you, inshallah ta'ala, get by. So going back to the point that I was making, you will not be able to understand the traps and the methods of Iblis except by studying, learning the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reading, attending the gatherings of the mashayikh, the ulama. And if you can't get access to the mashayikh, the ulama, you attend the gatherings of the students of knowledge, right? And alhamdulillah, today we have what? Lessons that we can attend virtually, online. There is no excuse for anyone, right? So, Ibn al-Jawzi rahmatullahi alayhi, in this statement he's saying, the first deception of Iblis is to block you away from knowledge. My brothers and my sisters, if we are not seeking knowledge, right? Even the slightest, whether it is what? Picking up a kitab, taking maybe what? Hadith or two, or learning certain basics, even if it is a little on a day-to-day basis, we won't even say day-to-day basis, on a weekly basis, then wallahi, I must say, and I don't want anybody to get offended, we indeed have become trapped. Wallahi, we've become occupied by that which is less important. Every single one of us has been created for one sole purpose. And we've probably heard this verse 1,000,000 times. And for 1,000,001th time, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, right? Allah says, we didn't create the jinn and the ins except for one sole purpose, which is to worship Him. Let me ask every single one of you an honest question. Can we worship Allah Azza wa Jalla accordingly without knowledge? Otherwise we will become no different to the Christians. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ. Those who are misguided. Sah. They thought they could just worship Allah Azza wa Jal based on their whims and desires. With whatever that came to mind, they would worship Allah Azza wa Jal with that. With ignorance. What is the difference between us and them when we just wake up and follow our whims and our desires? Wherever our whims and desires instruct us to turn to, we go towards that direction. Right? That brings me on to something that Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi mentioned. These statements of Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi, you won't find that in Talbis Iblis. However, I think it's extremely important and imperative to mention. In his kitab Rawdatul Muhibbeen, he speaks about طرق الشيطان في إغواء الإنسان. The methods and the traps of Iblis in how he misguides an individual. And in order for us to understand this, we have to be seeking knowledge, and inshallah ta'ala, through this gathering we can at least take some bits and bobs from that which the scholars have mentioned in their books. It will put things into perspective for us. He says that الطريقة الأولى, the first trap, or the first method that Iblis uses to misguide an individual. He says, يَقُولُ لَكَ أُكْفُرْ. He tries to trap us with disbelief, with kufr. فَلَوْ فَعَلْتَهَا ارْتَاحَ بَالُهُ. If you now disbelieve, خلاص, he will be at peace. وَلَمْ يَحْمِلْ لَكَ هَمًّا. He will stop paying concern to you. He will stop concentrating on you. خلاص, he already managed to get you to disbelief. What else is there that remains? You are going to be entering into the pits of the hellfire and you'll never be ever coming out. Al-kufr and al-shirk, if one dies upon that, it's not like dying upon a zina, murder, stealing, a riba, and so on and so forth. These are all major sins. If one has a tawheed, right? However, he fell into some of these things that I just mentioned, like riba, which is a major sin, a zina, which is a major sin. Not to downplay the seriousness of it, if one dies upon that, he is under the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. He had tawheed, he had la ilaha illallah. He stayed far away from shirk and kufr. But he fell into some of these deadly sins. If that individual dies without repenting from that, he's under the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. And if Allah Azza wa Jal decides to punish him, sooner or later he will come out of the hellfire. Are you brothers and sisters with me? So, the biggest trap of Iblis is to get you to disbelief, to apostate. And once you do that, khalas, he moves on to the next individual. This reminds me of something that, or a question that Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi was asked about. He said the Jews, they claim that they experience khushu' in the salah. They can concentrate, they're focused. As for us, when we pray, the shaitan is whispering, what is the wife cooking? Where are your car keys? What are you going to be doing tomorrow? Maybe this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and that, and this, and whatever have you. The whispers are endless. So Ibn al-Qayyim was asked, why is it that the Jews, they experience khushu' in the salah? Something that every single Muslim wants. One of the common questions that is asked is, how can we acquire khushu' in the salah? This is a very long topic. I have a lecture online on my YouTube channel. It's called 7 Ways in Attaining Khushu'. It's a 1-hour lecture, I believe. And the reason why I conducted that lecture is because it was a commonly asked question. His response was, what would the shaitan do with a heart that has become corrupt? A qalb that is khalas, kharban. Why would the shaitan focus on that kind of individual? He already got him now to commit kufr. Laylan wa naharan, sabahan wa masaan. He's committing acts of kufr. Why should he pay any consent to him? Make sense? But with you, he's constantly whispering. So going back to the point that I was making, a lot of the time when we speak about kufr or shirk, that which may pop to mind is the obvious, which is go to the grave and prostrate to a righteous man that has been buried there. Or make dua to that kind of individual. Or an idol, right? Every single Hajj, when I give a reminder on Tawheed, there's always that one person who comes up to me and he says, brother, why are you always speaking about the Tawheed? Why do you keep saying shirk, 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 shirk? Do you see anybody now prostrating to an idol? Every single Hajj, all the way up until 2019, because we take people out on Hajj. Some of our uncles that are here, we went together. Lillahi alhamd. Someone has to come up to me and say that. As if prostrating to idols is the only form of shirk that takes you out of the fold of Islam. And shirk, my brothers and my sisters, for those who are wondering what it actually is, it is to associate partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? Musawatullahi Azza wa Jal bil ghayr. To attribute that which is exclusive to Him to other than Allah Azza wa Jal. Whether it is in aspects of rububiyyah, lordship, uluhiyyah, which is what? Worship, all His names and attributes. So now I've been commanded to worship Allah Azza wa Jal alone. Whatever act of worship that I do, it is solely for Him. The moment I take that and I attribute it to other than Allah Azza wa Jal, or I divert that to other than Allah Azza wa Jal, I will fall under that statement of Allah when He said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not forgive shirk, but He forgives everything else. If one dies upon shirk, you're never coming out of the hellfire. Anything else that a person dies upon, you are under the will of Allah Azza wa Jal. That's not the only form of shirk that we see taking place in today's day and age. Let me give you guys a quick example, right? Swearing by other than Allah Azza wa Jal, ma ra'ayukum? We as kids, we used to say quite frequently at school, because if you say wallahi, billahi, tallahi, nobody believes you, because of it being excessively used. It indeed has lost its worth in the eyes of many. But if you swear on your mom's life, on your dad's life, on your dead nan's grave, oh, they believe you. It's serious now. Sahih? Youngsters, you guys remember that? I think we all fell into it, right? I was the first to fall into that. And we didn't know the seriousness of that. The Messenger ﷺ is saying to us, مَنْ حَلَفَ بِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ أَشْرَكَ. Whoever swears by other than Allah Azza wa Jalla has committed shirk. It could be major shirk, it could be minor shirk. And either way, it is far greater than any major sin that you would ever engage in. Right? The most sacred place on the face of this earth is where? Mecca, right? Around the Kaaba. Wallahi, wa billahi, wa tallahi, brothers and sisters, I witnessed this with these two eyes that Allah Azza wa Jalla blessed me with. Individuals going around the Kaaba, you know what they were chanting? Ya Ali, anjina min al-nar. Oh Ali, save us from the hellfire. And you know what was extremely sad? I saw some Indonesians, some Asians, came from the subcontinent. They don't know what is being said. They don't know that which is being uttered by these individuals. And they were just what? Chanting along with it. They don't mean it. They don't know the implications of what they are uttering. But out of ignorance, they ended up falling into that. I remember there was an Egyptian man, was maybe a couple of meters away, because it was extremely busy. Tawaf al-Ifada, I believe. That's when it's extremely busy around the Kaaba. He began to shout, say, Ya Allah. What did they say? They began to raise their voices even louder. Oh Ali, anjina min nar. So after seeing this, on the most, around the Kaaba, the most sacred place on the face of this earth, how can somebody ever say to me, why do you keep going on about the shirk and kufr? When I taught my students Kitab al-Tawheed, maybe taught it 7-8 times in the last year and a half, because this is one of the books that is from the core studies on the Muslim Survival Guide program online. The whole image of a Tawheed completely changed, because I would give a lot of these contemporary examples that many people are falling into. Things that we see ourselves falling into, but we don't actually realize. Let me tell you guys something else, right? When we hear somebody who's learned the qira'at, 7 qira'at, sure we've come across Ai-Imma, we've prayed behind them, listen to Shaykh Abdul Rashid al-Sufi online, who reads the verses in the Quran with different modes, sahih? When we hear the Quran being read in different ways and modes, right, with different dialects, all of it is from Allah Azza wa Jal. It amazes us, sah? Wow, that brother has the 7 qira'at, has the 10 qira'at, sahih? I'll never forget this. And I tend to mention this from time to time in my lectures, just to show you how the shaitan can trap an individual. Last Hajj, I believe it was 2019. 2019 was the last one, sahih? I was, of course, the Islamic tour guide for my group. And we happened to be with another group as well who had their own Islamic tour guide. He heard that there is going to be a tour guide who doesn't follow a madhab. أنا حنبلي يا إخوة. I follow the Hanbali madhab. Huh? Whether you follow the Hanafi madhab or the Maliki madhab or the Shafi'i madhab or all of these four great imams, they put down fiqh for us and made it extremely simple. And we really appreciate that which they left behind. So I don't know who told him that. But he heard this tour guide, he doesn't have a madhab. And because of that, I'm going to be misleading everybody. Ya Jama'ah, it's fiqh. As soon as I arrive back at the hotel, he comes charging towards me. Even my dad was shocked. What on earth is going on with this brother? And he's an older individual as well. He said, I heard you don't have a madhab. I said to him, Habibi, ana Hanbali, don't worry. Huh? I seen he was extremely hasty, and his attitude was not the best. And this is not what we need when we go for Hajj. Most people, when they go for Hajj, all they are concerned about is, I want to perform Hajj in the best possible way. My life savings are on the line. The guy spent 6,000, 7,000 pounds on this Hajj. He wants to ensure that this Hajj is performed in accordance to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. The last thing that you want is to be sitting around arguing, debating, and so on and so forth. And before I came on Hajj, a good friend of mine told me that there is going to be so-and-so who sees it permissible to invoke the Messenger ﷺ. When we make dua, who do we make dua to? Allah Azza wa Jal, right? What did the Messenger ﷺ teach Abdullah ibn Abbas? فَإِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ. When you ask Allah Azza wa Jal. I just basically brushed it off and I didn't think much of it. I thought this is extremely far-fetched. Someone who knows the 7 qira'at, someone who recites the book of Allah Azza wa Jal, laylan wa nahara, you must be extremely strong to know the 7 qira'at in the Quran, right? I remember I prayed behind him as well. I believe it was the Maghrib prayer. And then I see he's just constantly trying to engage in argumentations and disputations. I sat him down and I said to him, listen, you're older than me. Let's respect one another and ensure that everyone who's with us performs Hajj in the best possible way. And please cut off any controversies. Because what do you mean by controversies? And this is now an opportunity to find out, what does this individual actually believe? Don't start teaching the people that it's okay for them to make dua to the Prophet ﷺ. That's an example of staying away from controversies. I'm mentioning this, my brothers and my sisters, as an example that we'll never forget. He said to me, what do you believe about somebody who does that? We've been taught in the Quran that this is an act of shirk. When I do an act of worship, it has to be what? Solely for Allah. If you pray for Allah, right? Because it's an act of worship. Ad-du'a wal ibadah. Dua is an act of worship as well. Should you now be making dua to other than Allah? Of course not. Only and solely for Allah Azza wa Jal. It is exclusive to Him. I can see the temperature is going up. It's becoming extremely agitated. And then he said, what's your evidence? I gave him a whole load of ayat. So many ayat in the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. He says, you claim to be from the Prophet ﷺ's family and you say you can't invoke the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Of course, yes. He tells Ali, who was right next to him, if this individual doesn't stop saying this, I'm going to take my passport and leave. I'm not the one that started the argument or this dispute. Point of the matter is, my beloved brothers and sisters, wallahi, I heard him recite Quran, it trembled my heart. That's how good his Quran and his tajweed was. It shook me. It really took me aback. It blew me away. You are thinking to yourself, a man who's recited the Quran, who's done probably hundreds of khatamat, كيف خفي عليه هذا? How did this maybe go over his head. الشاهد من الكلام, and it's sad to say that a man like this was trapped by Iblis. If someone who's reciting the Quran ليلا ونهارا صباحا ومساء, day and night he's reciting the Quran, and he wasn't safe from this, where do me and you stand? This is one of the traps of the devil, in how he might drag you into committing the most gravest sin possible. Some of the other contemporary statements that we come across from time to time is how one, because of his intelligence, right, which then ends up deceiving him, very well academically educated, Allahumma barik, degree, then masters, and then a PhD, graduated from one of these secular universities, extremely knowledgeable in his speciality. He becomes so convinced with his own intelligence that he begins to question some of the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because of him becoming what? An intellectual. How often have we heard statements such as, how can this be possible? Give you guys an example of the hadith, الذبابة, which is in Sahih al-Bukhari. إذا وقع الذباب في شراب أحدكم فليغمسه, right? Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told us, you have this glass of water, sah? If a fly now dips inside of it, what is the instruction of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? Make sure you dip the other side, right? فإن في أحد جناحيه داء وفي الآخر الشفاء. Because in one of the wings is a what? Is a cure, and the other there is what? A disease. So it cancels it out. Some intellectuals came to this hadith, well, Muslims, claim to be Muslims. No, this is not something that I can believe in. It doesn't fall in line with what? The aql. The intellect. Your intellect, my brother, is extremely limited. How often, brothers and sisters, have we come across an article in today's day and age, the 14th century, right? No, 14th century, that we thought doesn't fall in line with my intellect, but then it is medically proven that this is actually correct. This is one of them. I read this article saying, الآن فقد عصيت قبل وكنت من المفسدين. Now you realize, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told us this 1400 years ago. Not so long ago I came across an article that it has now been medically proven that drinking while standing up is not good for you. And how they want to change the rules and regulations in sport. Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam taught us this 1400 years ago. The shaitan traps them in this particular manner. You're a very well-educated academic who's been studying for so many years. One of the things they teach you in university and they keep going on about all the time is to be a critical thinker. Do you guys agree? Right, academics. Just about everything that they teach you, learn to critically think. So much so that evidence from the Quran and Sunnah is presented to you, let me critically think. So much so you find yourself in a pickle where you begin to doubt just about every single thing that you hear. Because you have to prove everything logically. Are you going to wait for an article to be released that medically proves this and medically proves that? And then at times they might retract some of their statements and then they go back on it again. Ya Jama'ah, just take what Allah Azza wa Jalla told you. وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٍ. Nobody can tell you like Allah Azza wa Jalla. He who created us and brought us into existence knows about every minute aspect of this world better than any of these intellectuals, whose minds are very limited. So because of that, he made this belief. This doesn't make sense. This does not fall in line with my intellectual excellence. And because of that, I'm going to disbelieve in this hadith. I'll take this one because it makes sense. This also creeps into the feminists. who might come to some of the ahkam, rulings pertaining to mawarith, inheritance, doesn't make sense to what they've learnt, right? And they begin to reject and deny the laws and rules of Allah Azza wa Jal. Little does she know, even though she walks outside with hijab and she might pray, but because of some of her kufri statements, she may have shooted out of this religion. And may Allah Azza wa Jal protect every single one of us. It's from the fitna that we are dealing with. If we don't learn, trust me, brothers and sisters, there is enough people who are ready to teach us. Likewise, when it comes to our kids, we don't educate them, don't worry. There is enough of those who are ready to educate them intellectually. And because they don't have a solid Islamic foundation, what happens? They wobble left, right, and before you know it, they're questioning the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. And then he might what? Secretly disbelieve. And the rest is very well known. So that's the first trap of the Iblis. How long do I have?
40 minutes.
Huh?
40 minutes.
How long have we gone on for? Like we haven't even covered maybe what, 5% of what I want to speak about. الطريقة الثانية. The second method or the second trap that the shaitan uses to misguide an individual. فإذا سلمت من الأولى فإنه يزين لك بدعة من عمل أو قول فتظن أنك على حق وتنسى أن كل بدعة ضلالة. If he can't get you to do kufr, he tries to trap you with innovation. He begins to beautify for you certain practices. How can this ever be an act of misguidance? When it is something good, there's nothing wrong with it. There are so many things that you can do which seems extremely beautiful from the apparent. However, our religion is not built on emotion, or what we think, or what my uncle thinks, or what my teacher thinks. لا, أبدا. Our deen is what? اتباع. نص مصدق وبحث محقق. This dalil that we accept, it has to be what? An authentic evidence. And then it also has to be put in its proper context. This is our religion. What Allah Azza wa Jal said, what the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, and how the Sahaba, they practiced Islam. I'm not here to tell you what I think, or what my uncle or what my teacher thinks. They are just there to connect you. His wazifa, his occupation is to connect you to what we just mentioned. Quran, Sunnah, the understanding of the three golden generations that the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam praised. And then he says, فَتَظُنَّ أَنَّكَ عَلَى الْحَقِّ. And you begin to think that you are upon the truth. وَتَنْسَى. And you forget that every innovation is misguidance. And that every misguidance will lead you to the hellfire. And at times, my beloved brothers and sisters, I know it can be extremely, extremely difficult to separate yourself from that which our forefathers have been doing, جيل بعد جيل, generation after generation. And this brings me to a very, very important point, which is accepting the truth from wherever it comes from. I'm sure every single one of us have come across that hadith and we strive towards it. When the Messenger ﷺ said, وَمَا تَوَاضَ أَحَدٌ لِلَّهِ إِلَّا رَفَعَهُ. Never does an individual humble himself except Allah will raise it. Humility is a very noble act. And I will suffice with this one narration of Fudail ibn Iyad, who was from the righteous of the past. When he was asked about being humble, right, he said the following: أَن تَخْضَعَ لِلْحَقِّ وَتَنْقَادَ لَهُ. That you submit to the truth and you lower your wing for it. And then look what he said. And I know this is extremely, extremely hard. وَلَوْ سَمِعْتَهُ مِنْ صَبِيٍّ قَبِلْتُهُ مِنْهُ. If you were to hear the truth from a child, you accept it. وَلَوْ سَمِعْتَهُ مِنْ أَجْهَلِ النَّاسِ قَبِلْتُهُ مِنْهُ. Even if you were to hear it from the most ignorant of people, you accept it. You have a very high position in society. Someone comes and corrects you. Are you going to turn around and say, who are you to correct me? Wallahi, one time I heard with these two ears somebody saying, I knew about the sunnah before you knew what a sandwich was. This is a man who is running a masjid. He is running a community. He was being advised by certain individuals, you want to teach me what is right and what is wrong? I knew about the sunnah before you knew what a sandwich was. I never forgot it. Back in 2011 when I was still in Yemen. Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was asked about al-kibr, arrogance. He said, بَطَرُ الْحَقِّ وَغَمْطُ النَّاسِ, to reject the truth and to belittle the people. And this is the opposite of what? Being humble. I heard some aunties previously say, and I tend to use this example, you want to teach me how to make wudu? I used to clean your backside and now you want to tell me how to make wudu? No. We are students of knowledge, all of us here. And we will continue to keep learning all the way up until we meet Allah Azza wa Jal. Imam Ahmad rahmatullahi alayhi was asked, until when? Until when? He said the famous statement, right? From the ink pot to the grave. And another narration, from the cradle to the grave. I'm not referring to that film, statement of Imam Ahmad. From the cradle all the way up to the grave. We will continue to seek knowledge. When you look at the madhab of Imam Ahmad rahmatullahi alayhi, sometimes in one particular mas'ala, there is 3 different riwayat, 3 different views that he had. Why? Why is that? Because someone would bring him a hadith, or he would come across a hadith, and he would be humble enough to retract some of his previous positions. Right? Even Ibn al-Qayyim rahmatullahi alayhi, and I know this is even more difficult than that which we mentioned, he says, لا تصلح لك درجة التواضع حتى تقبل الحق ممن تحب وممن تبغض. You will not be able to reach that level of becoming humble until you leave, or should I say, until you accept the truth from the people that are your friends, that you love, and those who you might have some sort of problem with, the people that you hate. Someone corrects you after leading the salah, and previously you had a problem with him. It's extremely difficult to accept it. You have to step on your ego and bite your tongue and just accept it from that individual. Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi says, Deenullahi wasat. The deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a balanced, or should I say, it's the middle path. بين الغالي فيه والجافي عنه. And there's a profound reason as to why I'm mentioning this. Right? The middle path between 2 things, which is going overboard and being negligent. Sometimes you tell somebody, stay away from this innovative practice. What is the initial response? You're being mutashaddid. Stop being harsh. Sahih? Or sometimes you might say to a liberal, Akhi, you should dress maybe accordingly with the correct Islamic clothing. You are told, stop being mutashaddid. Stop being harsh. Mutashaddid means somebody who's harsh. Who in essence is mutashaddid? Who can tell me? A lot of the time when we speak about extremists, what is the first name that pops to mind? Huh? Salafi, yeah? What else? Khawarij, ISIS, Sahih? Like, is that the only form of extremism? Yes, without a shadow of a doubt, they went overboard. What about the liberal who wants to water down the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal? You think the shaitan cares whether you become an extremist or you become somebody who's a liberal, negligent with regards to your religion? Wallahi la ibadi. As Ibn Taymiyyah mentions, the shaitan does not care. The real extremist, you want to know who he is? the one who does not follow the deen of Allah Azza wa Jalla accordingly. Someone who's growing his beard because the Prophet ﷺ said, grow your beard and cut your mustache, this is not extremist. Here the Messenger ﷺ taught us this. A man one time came up to him and he had a big mustache and he had a shaved beard. And then he was looking at the Prophet ﷺ with a long beard. He said, who told you to do this? Because هَكَذَا أَمَرَنِي رَبِّي. My Lord commanded me to do this. Tell a sister to wear a hijab, right? And she's saying to you, Akhi, Allah Ghafoor Rahim, which we're going to come into. Allah is oft forgiving. Don't be harsh upon me. You're being harsh upon yourself. How are you being harsh upon yourself? The fire and the punishment that you have to deal with. Will you be able to handle it? Right? Just as much as we hear the media speaking ill about ISIS, the same energy should be saved for those who are liberals, are watering down the religion. And it makes sense why the Quilliam Foundation, who are extinct at the moment, right? They have no existence anymore, were being funded with millions. They were being funded with millions. When they were watering down the religion, completely dislocating al-Islam from its what? Values and fundamentals. The first are extremists. This is a type of extremism as well. Being negligent is a type of extremism. Going off the rails. So the correct way of following Islam is what? To do what Allah Azza wa Jalla told you to do, to follow the ad-din al-wasat. الطريقة الثالثة. He says, if you manage to save yourself from the first two traps, which is what? Al-kufr and also innovation. Now he moves on to the third trap, or the third method of misguiding you, which is عمل كبيرة من الكبائر. It's to fall into major sins. حتى يجعلك تذنب. You then fall into these sins. ولكن مع التوبة والاستغفار يغفر الله لك. But with tawbah, seeking repentance and saying the istighfar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will erase this major sin that you may have fallen victim to. You know, my brothers and my sisters, especially in the month of Ramadan, we're saying this a lot in the lectures that I conducted in the different masajid. Right? I said this, I believe, also in the lecture beforehand, and it's a must that we mention. It's become a pivotal part of our lives, these faults. Before, if you wanted to fall into a major sin as zina, what does an individual have to do? He has to leave his home, goes to a nightclub, picks up a sister or a woman, takes her home, he does whatever he has to do with her right. Isn't that so? Fast forward to 2022. If somebody now wanted to commit a major sin, how easy has it become? It's become extremely, extremely easy. In the month of Ramadan, and we deal with this every single year, young brothers and sisters contacting us saying how they fell into zina in the month of Ramadan. How did it start? Where did it originate from? These thoughts. The days when we thought, brothers and sisters, that the only way that one will become misguided or corrupted is by them hanging around with the wrong crowd, whether it may be a drug dealer or a woman who's loose. These days are longer. I'll say that again. The days when we thought that the only way our youngsters, or I shouldn't even say youngsters anymore, one becoming corrupted is by them hanging around with the wrong crowd, these days are long finished. We can wave goodbye to these kind of days that we used to have. You have a young child, maybe to the tender age of 14, 15, who is in between four walls of her home. You think that she's safe. She's not hanging around with the wrong crowd. She becomes exposed to all of this filth and evil. And before you know it, she's dressing a certain way. And when you tell her, why are you dressing like this? Everybody's doing it. Who's everybody? Everyone that she looks at on the internet. The hearts have become corrupted. And it has become the root cause of one either physically committing zina or becoming addicted to adult content, which then turns looking into a kabira min al-kabair. There was an article that I was reading, and they concluded social media is one of the root causes of one becoming addicted to adult content. He's looking at filth and evil, however, now he's become bored of it. He needs something else. One thing leads to another. And before you know it, he's now become addicted to adult content. You will be surprised how many 14-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds, as we speak, have become addicted to adult content. We speak to youngsters all the time. We are contacted by youngsters all the time. There are reports, there are articles, there are statistics, all stating that they became exposed to a lot of this filth and evil, initially from where? Social media. One thing led to another. Khalas, he's become bored of adult content. He wants to now actually engage in that filth and evil. So he wants to physically do it. مع الأسف الشديد. This is the kind of sexualized society that we're living in. And may Allah Azza wa Jal protect our hearts. This is why I felt the need to do a series on softening the heart. Because our hearts have become so polluted with these phones that have led us to normalizing many major sins, that we are in need of treating the heart. And there are certain actions that can what? Treat the heart, even though initially it will be extremely hard. However, you keep striving hard, and it's only a matter of time before you begin to taste the sweetness of your ibadah, the sweetness of that particular worship that you're engaging in. What time is Aisha, brothers? I'm going to go on, inshallah ta'ala, for another 15 minutes and we'll stop. I think I've tired out the crowd. The fourth trap of the Iblis is minor sins. The fifth, he says, فَإِذَا تُبْتَ مِنْ كُلِّ ذَلِكَ فَأَنْتَ تُعْتَبُرُ الْآنِ فِي الْمَرَاتِبِ الْعَالِيَةِ. If you now make tawbah from all that which has been mentioned, you are now considered to be from the greats in the eyes of Iblis. He now tries to use a fifth method. وَهِيَ أَنْ يُشْغِلُكَ بِالْأَقَلِّ أَجْرًا مِنَ الْأَعْلَى. He busies you with that which brings you less reward. Give you guys an example. You walk into the masjid and you find some trash on the road. It's a time of the salah, right? That's at least going to take you some time to clean. You need to be answering the call of prayer. Sahih? We know that removing the rubbish and any harmful objects from the streets is from the Iman, right? As the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Imātul al-adha tariq. Tayyib. Which one should you be prioritizing in this kind of situation? The salah, the adhan, the iqamah now is going off, and then come back and clean it. Right? For you now to become preoccupied with that, and then to leave the salah in the masjid, this is now the shaitan trapping you with that which is less in reward. Another example of that are these phones. You may well be giving da'wah to somebody. Is that khair? However, the iqamah is going off. Are you going to say, wait, let me quickly give da'wah to this individual, I'll come back to the salah later? Or maybe I'm watching an Islamic lecture. I'm doing good on my phone. Using your phones, my beloved brothers and sisters, is mubah. It is permissible. However, if something that is permissible, that is mubah, is going to now busy you from that which is mandatory, that becomes haram. Isn't that so? And that is a principle for anything that is permissible. If it's now going to busy you away from that which is what? Wajib, هذا الآن it becomes a musibah. It becomes a calamity. الطريقة السادسة والأخير. The last trap of Iblis. Says if you now become saved from all of these different methods of Iblis, he now uses what do you call that which you keep for last on a battlefield. Khalas, now I've been reading quite a bit on the conflict. Putin now is going to resort to the shaitan now uses his secret weapon, as our brother mentioned. Right? أقوى أساليبه. Sorry? Putin is going to use the women in Ukraine? He could well do so. Weapons of mass destruction. The shaitan now uses one of his biggest traps and greatest methods of misleading an individual. And that is something that even the prophets couldn't protect themselves from. وهي تسريط الأهل والأقربين ومن حولك من الناس لشتمك وإهانتك. He will use your family members, those who are most closest and beloved to you, to mislead you by insulting you, making you feel extremely sad. When a family relative insults you or harms you, it is far more painful than somebody who you don't know. It hurts. Extremely painful. You may take longer to get over that than any other type of harm that comes your way. It may well be, as we mentioned earlier, they begin to call you mutashaddid. You just started practicing. Wallah, it feels like the whole world is against you. The shaitan can't take it anymore. Right? He had you in the corner. He had you on the ropes. Right? And now all of a sudden you started praying. And when an individual now starts practicing, he's most passionate. He wants to do everything at the same time. Sahih? He wants to fast, he wants to pray. Qiyamul layl, Siyam bin Nahar. He spends a lot of time in the masjid. As soon as you walk inside of your home, your parents are beginning to think that this guy is on his way to joining ISIS. Just yesterday somebody was saying this to me, because I started practicing, and actually it was you. No, yesterday as well, but our brother Yahya said something to me. Go and tell the brothers what they said, what the mother was saying.
When I first started practicing and going to the masjid, my mom asked me if I was a secret agent trying to...
This is a living example of Yahya. So when he first started practicing, non-Muslim mother, right? His non-Muslim mother said to him, are you a secret agent who's working for the government? والأمثلة في هذا كثيرة. As many examples. A lot of brothers, they tend to put in questions, saying, what do you advise me? How should I deal with this? No. And then Ibn al-Qayyim says, فَهَلْ عَرَفْتَ مَرْتَبَتَكَ عِنْدَ إِبْلِيسِ. Do you know now which position you are in the eyes of Iblis? And this is maybe a question I want to think about. Right? Let's now, inshallah ta'ala, I think we have 7 more minutes. 7 more minutes and we'll stop, inshallah. Some of the statements of Ibn al-Jawzi rahmatullahi alayhi in his kitab Talbisu Iblis. And this is what I mainly wanted to go into today. However, قدر الله ما شاء فعل. We only covered one of his statements, and the rest were the statements of Ibn Qayyim and also Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Jawzi says, وَمِن تَلْبِيسَ إِبْلِيسِ أو وَمِن تَلْبِيسِ إِبْلِيسَ عَلَى عَوَامِ النَّاسِ, from the deceptions of Iblis on the commoners, the general folk, right? The awam. أنهم يفعلون المعاصي, they do sinful acts. فإذا أنكرت عليهم, and when you show your disapproval or you try to advise him in that which he is doing, what's his response? الرب كريم, Allah is generous. والعفو واسع, and the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pretty vast. Allah is Ghafoor Rahim. How often do we hear, my iman's in my heart? Sahih? Don't judge me, my iman's in my heart. La wallah, you got it completely wrong. If someone does an evil in front of you, what is it that we have been instructed with? To just watch him, smile and just walk away? Huh? Sorry? Naam, the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ. And of course, in most cases you might not necessarily be able to change anything with your hand. What are you going to do, beat him up? فَإِنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ بِلِسَانِهِ. You don't have the ability to change it with your hand. What do? You change it with your tongue. By advising him in a soft and gentle manner. Right? Remember, you were like that once upon a time. كَذَلِكَ كُنْتُم مِّن قَبْلِ فَمَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْكُمْ. Don't ever look down on that individual thinking that you've now become something. Wallahi al-Azim, he may have a heart that will be accepted by Allah Azza wa Jalla. And because of your arrogance, you'll be thrown into the pits of the hellfire. And arrogance is a serious thing. Right? I don't think he will be worse than Fir'aun, right? Fir'aun, who claimed, أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى, I am the Lord, the Most High. And even then Allah, when he sent Harun and Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, what did he instruct him with? Speak to him in a gentle way. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Remember, you were like that once upon a time. Speak to him in a soft and gentle way. Maybe smile. Make him feel that you are not what? Judging him. That's what they say, right? You guys are always judging us. The haram police. Huh? The haram police. There are pages on Instagram dedicated to the haram police. And it may well be that the one who opened this page, he had a very rough interaction with a practicing individual. He was disrespected. And Allah knows best. Right? We hear statements such as, my iman is in my heart. No matter what he does with his limbs, his iman is in his heart. You know, Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullah alayhi says, فَقَلَّ مَنْ تَجِدُ فِي اعْتِقَادِهِ فَسَادًا إِلَّا وَهُوَ يُظْهِرُ ذَلِكَ فِي عَمَلِهِ. You will barely find anyone who has a corrupt belief, except that this will now show on his limbs. Isn't this what the Prophet ﷺ told us? أَلَا وَإِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً. Right? In a person's body is what? A mudghah. If that becomes rectified, everything else becomes rectified as well. Sah. And if it becomes corrupt, everything else becomes corrupt as well. أليس كذلك? Right? In fact, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu said, we've only been instructed to judge that which is apparent. We don't go inside of your heart. We just judge what an individual is doing with his limbs. So this fallacy of, don't judge me, my iman is in my heart. And this individual now is maybe drug dealing, or he's smoking. All types of drugs, right? Goes in and out of the nightclub. This only happened after his heart became corrupt. And then someone may use as evidence the statement of the Prophet ﷺ when he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَنْظُرُ إِلَى صُوَرِكُمْ وَلَا إِلَى أَجْسَادِكُمْ وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ. Is that the end of the hadith? Prophet ﷺ said, Allah does not look at your physical appearance. How big you are, how skinny you are, Allah doesn't look at that. Right? وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ. But Allah looks at your heart. The one who is saying, my iman's in my heart, he will quote this hadith. Hay ma ra'yukum? What do you guys think? He has an evidence, right? He has an argument. Is that the end of the hadith? What's the end of the hadith? وَلَكِنْ يَنْظُرُ إِلَىٰ قُلُوبِكُمْ وَإِلَىٰ أَعْمَالِكُمْ. Allah looks at your heart and He also looks at your actions. Hadith is in Sahih Muslim on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Wallahi, for years I used to hear it. I was like, Ajib, how do I respond back to this doubt? When I first started seeking knowledge, Kaif? How can somebody justify the evil acts that he's engaging in and then quote this hadith? Doesn't make sense. And then I came across it in Sahih Muslim. Prophet ﷺ is saying that Allah looks at your heart and He also looks at your actions. Four more minutes. We made mention of this in passing from the statements of Ibn Jawzi is لَبَّسَ إِبْلِيسُ عَلَى الْعَوَامِ بِالْجَرَيَانِ مَعَ الْعَادَاتِ. The way that Iblis deceived the عَامَّةُ النَّاسِ, the commoners, is by beautifying for them their cultural practices. وَذَلِكَ مِنْ أَكْثَرِ أَسْبَابِ هَلَاكِهِمْ. Look what he says. This is from the greatest of that which causes them now to be destroyed, or that leads to their destruction. وَأَنَّهُمْ يُقَلِّدُونَ الْآبَاءِ. And that is because they blind follow their forefathers. Isn't this what destroyed Quraysh? When the haqq was brought to them, what was their response? إِنَّا وَجَدْنَا آبَاءَنَا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ. We found our forefathers doing this particular act, and we are going to take their way as guidance. أليس كذلك? And because of that, they committed shirk. And because of that, today people are committing shirk. Wallahi, just about every single time I walk past the Prophet ﷺ's grave, I hear somebody standing there with khushu'. You know how you're meant to be focusing and concentrating in your prayer? Which should only be for Allah Azza wa Jal. Someone standing there shedding tears, right? Saying, Ya Rasulullah, do this for me. Ya Rasulullah, do that for me. I overhear this as I'm going by. I want to speak to the brother, but the only language, right, that he understands is what Urdu. And he's saying this in Arabic. It's like somebody what translated it for him: when you go to the grave, make sure you say X, Y, and Z. I want to speak to the brother. Allah, I wish I knew Urdu. I used to be married to a sister back in the day. I wish I benefited Urdu from her, like in Qaddar Allah ma sha fa'al. That was the plan.
It's not too late.
Huh?
Not too late.
I made tawbah for marriage. نحن موحدون. Stick to one, that's it. He's on camera as well, I can't say much. والإسلام في اعتقادهم على ما نشأوا عليه من العادة. And they think Islam is that which they have been upon all of these years, that was passed down to them by their forefathers. Brothers and sisters, there's nothing wrong with cultural practices as long as it doesn't go against your deen. Islam did not come to eliminate all cultural practices, la wallah. وَالْأَصْلُ فِي عَادَاتِنَا الْإِبَاحَةِ حَتَّى يَجِيءَ صَارِفُ الْإِبَاحَةِ. As the poet mentions, the base default ruling of your adat, cultural practices, is that it is mubah, it is permissible. Until we find an evidence that goes against this cultural practice. For example, in some of our cultural practices, they say, he's just your cousin. You can hang around with him. أليس كذلك? You can mix and intermingle with cousins, right? And so-called, quote, in quote, out uncles. Not your blood, paternal or maternal uncle, who is halal for you to be undressing in front of. And when I say undressing, I mean like taking off the hijab. Someone who was maybe the mother's friend from a very young age. She tells her daughter, this is your uncle. He walks in and out of the house. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, the amount of messages that I received, right, of some extended relatives committing fahisha, sexually abusing young relatives of theirs. And then they're messaging us saying, what do you advise me? Shall I forgive this individual? I can't stand him, I'm burning inside. I want to maybe report it to the police, I want to do this, I want to do that. And when you dig deep, the parent is maybe partly to blame. If only you follow the Sharia. And sometimes what happens, right? And this is again normalized. He comes over with his wife. You have your wife there, right? Your friends and their wives are sitting around with your wife. Everyone just sitting around, joking around. Huh? There is an article on Islam Q&A. And I think the Sheikh did an excellent job in this article that he wrote. You know what he compiled? Personal statements of individuals who may have lost their husbands to a zina while they were at home. The Sheikh brings personal statements. And the root cause for that was taking it easy. Don't be harsh, we're just friends. We're just friends, we're just hanging around, we're not doing much. We're just like, why are you scared? Sometimes you hear statements such as, do you think he's going to run away with your wife? Like, this is the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is a cultural practice that goes against the deen. إِيَّاكُمْ وَالدُّخُولَ عَلَى النِّسَاءِ قَالَ أَفَرَأَيْتُمُ الْحَمُ قَالَ الْحَمُ مَوْتٌ. Prophet ﷺ warned us from entering upon women. And then he was asked about the brother-in-law, who's the closest to his brother's wife. The Messenger ﷺ said he's deaf. Is it surprising what ends up happening after that? Wallahi, it's not. And this is happening in Islamic households because they let their guard down.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
I mentioned three statements very, very quickly. I'm trying to, inshallah ta'ala, finish it in 3 minutes, if that's okay, Imam. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
It says, وَمِن تَلْبِيسِ إِبْلِيسَ عَلَى الْعَوَامِ تَقْدِيمُهُمْ الْمُتَزَهِّدِينَ عَلى الْعُلَمَاءِ. From the deception of Iblis on the commoners, the general fault, is that they prioritize the zuhad, the righteous, devout worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who don't have knowledge, but they are people of worship. Just because he's walking a certain way, or he's wearing a suf like this, he's wearing cotton, he's wearing a big cloak, they begin to think that it is him who is upon that which is righteous. And that the alim, who might not necessarily be carrying himself a certain way, that he's ignorant because he doesn't shake his head like this individual. عظموه خصوصا إذا طأطأ رأسه وتخشع له. Because of him maybe shaking his head or maybe acting all humble in front of them, they begin to do ta'aleem of him. They begin to honor him, greaten him. ويقولون أين هذا من فلان العالم ذلك طالب الدنيا. They say because he's not wearing very rugged clothes, right? He's not an alim. وهذا الزاهد لا يأكل علبة ولا رطبة ولا يتزوج قط. Because he doesn't eat an ilab, a grape, and he doesn't eat very nice types of foods, they begin to think, okay, there's a problem here. The alim doesn't do this. Sorry, the alim does it, but he doesn't do it. So mixing who's a person of knowledge with somebody who's not. Two more inshallah ta'ala. من تلبيس إبليس على المنكر أنه إذا أنكر جلس في مجمع يصف ما فعل ويتباهى به. From the deception of Iblis, of somebody who has maybe now disapproved of some evil that was taking place. You saw somebody doing something bad. You showed him that which is right. You advised him. He then comes to a sitting and begins to speak about those that he advised. Look at these individuals. He begins to insult them and curse them. Wherever he goes, he begins to insult them and curse them. And he doesn't know whether these individuals have actually what? Repented from that which he is now still criticizing them for. And last but not least, فَرُبَّمَا رَأَيْتَ إِمَامَ مَسْجِدٍ يَتَصَدَّى لِلْإِقْرَاءِ وَلَا يَعْرِفُ مَا يُفْسِدُ الصَّلَاةِ. At times Allah Azza wa Jal might bless you with a particular platform, and you are now a community leader or someone of importance, right? You don't know the basics of the deen. You don't know the basics of the deen. You don't know what is right and what is wrong. However, because of your platform, you see yourself as somebody who, if I go and sit down in a class, then people are going to look at me as somebody who's ignorant. And then they will begin to look at me in a different way. So the shaitan now deceived him and prevented him from gaining an understanding in the religion. And because of that, he remains upon his ignorance and acts like he knows when he doesn't. الأخير إن قوما علت هممهم فحصلوا علوم الشرع القرآن والحديث والفقه والأدب وغير ذلك فأتاهم إبليس يخفي التلبيس فأراهم أنفسهم بعين عظمة أو بعين عظيمة لما نالوا وأفادوا. You may have benefited, you may have learned in fiqh, adab, al-hadith and so on and so forth, right? You see the people crowding around you and you begin to think to yourself that you now become somebody. And easily arrogance can creep into that individual's heart. And again, these are from the deceptions of Iblis. أحسن الله إليكم وبارك الله فيكم. It's always nice coming here. I think this is the second time. I just want to thank the administration for allowing this program to go ahead. May Allah Azza wa Jal honor every single one of you guys. Ameen. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما. Our brother Sheikh Uthman Farooq is going to be coming to the UK. Shall we bring him here or Masjid Tawfiq? MashaAllah, Allahumma barik. A lot of people turn up today. I think you guys know him, right? Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to try and bring him to one of the masajid. Bismillah ta'ala. Ahsan Allahu alaykum. Wallahi, I really put a smile on my face seeing these beautiful nur faces. Ahsan Allahu alaykum. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك وجزاكم الله خيرا for listening attentively.